Hey everyone, I'm joined here by the mid laner for Obey, Wlfy, who, after, I guess, a little intermission, is back in the SPL, and we're here to talk about Phase 2, Phase 1, and some of his past seasons as well. Starting with Phase 2, I know it probably has not been exactly the outcomes that you've wanted for all of these games, and I'm sure you and probably some other teams would say that you deserve to win some of these sets and maybe have faltered a little bit in late game execution and things like that. How are you guys feeling so far about Phase 2, especially since now we're sort of at the back end, almost looking towards playoffs and Worlds?
Well, considering that there are not many chances we're going to be making playoffs to begin with, obviously we can make Worlds only through the qualification, if I'm not mistaken, at this point in time.
Yeah.
Like, we don't feel great about it. We had multiple games or sets that we could have ended them, but we did not. We played the early game really well. We made the transition into the mid game as well pretty decently, and then we made a very major mistake in the late game, and then everything crumbled.
Sure.
So yeah, we don't feel good about that. As to for myself, of course, I'm not incredibly pleased to like come back into the league and be in the last place right now.
Sure.
But it's a part of the game, and it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
trying to kind of get going, get used to like whatever was happening before, and hopefully we're going to be still having a good run for Worlds, or potentially even qualify for Worlds and have a good run there. You never know.
Sure.
It's I guess the season is not over yet, so I might as well keep the faith, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think you can sort of have a little faith because, especially the last couple Worlds tournaments, sort of dark horses or lower end teams have sort of come up to really win it all. So I think that leaves a lot of potential open for some of the bottom seeded teams in this league, especially.
I most definitely felt that. Yeah, I remember even in season, not so much in season, what was it, season 4, more so in season 5 at the very least, when we played against Splice. Splice wasn't doing too hot throughout like probably their entire year, and then like they came into Worlds. And quite frankly, I don't think many people expected them to win, but they did end up winning. Yeah. So, I feel that when I didn't play season 6, in season 6, who was it PK or SK, I should say.
Yep.
Which SK wasn't doing too hot at that time, but they qualified to Worlds, and they had like a hell of a run for it. So, it's definitely, there should be a little bit of faith to keep track of, but yeah, we'll see.
Sure. I know you said you're trying to get some things going for the team, and I know Ra also has sort of been buffed a little bit. Is that why you're sort of picking this up? Is that somewhat of a comfort pick for you?
So with Ra, at the very least, I've been playing Ra since the beginning of my career. My 3 god pulls, that would be from the mages class, because I love to play mages, I love to play hunters as well, but from as far as mages go, I play Ra, I play Isis, and I play Poseidon, and everybody knows about them. They are very Poseidon, not so much. I mean, not so janky. Ra and Isis are pretty janky. People don't really consider them as being good characters, but. Yeah, I've always loved playing the character. It has nothing to do with the buff. I want to play the character even before the buff came through. As soon as he got buffed, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to become a top pick now, which he did become a top pick.
Yeah.
With Isis is exactly the same thing. As going into Worlds, Isis is getting a 20%, I believe, 20% buff on her 1, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to help her clear. It's going to help her with a little bit with her damage and stuff like that. So I'm definitely going to look forward towards picking her up as well. Yeah, I mean, anything to do with like janky-ish characters, something that is like out of the meta, people are not really used to it, and it gives me an advantage.
Why do you feel that Ra is kind of janky? Because in my mind, I mean, he has like pretty safe clear in the 1, and especially now that the 2 has been buffed, and you know, healers are always valuable, I would say. What about Ra do you think is sort of janky?
Well, it's just like the way he is considered in the meta, for example, right? Before he got buffed, now he is meta, so like he's not considered so janky anymore. But before he got buffed, I mean, you had Persephone being a top character, Merlin and Raging were like picked throughout the whole split 1. Obviously, HiRa is a little bit janky, but then again, Darkness makes it work. So like more people have been starting to pick her up.
Yep.
So yeah, like characters that they are not being picked so much, I personally consider janky. Even Poseidon received more play than Ra did, for example, in the first split, I'm pretty sure, and towards the beginning of the second split. But yeah, Ra is kind of becoming a meta now, if I may say he is actually meta at the moment. So I guess it doesn't really classify so much as a janky pick anymore.
Sure, sure. Another thing I've noticed recently, at least in maybe the past week or 2 weeks of your guys' games, is you started picking up the on her mid, especially when Sino picks up Stonecutting Sword.
Yeah.
And it seems like you guys are really trying to focus objectives in the early game. Is this like a new strategy that you guys are trying out?
This is a strategy that we have been trying out. We've been trying to polish it. We're not playing it perfectly by no means, because as you guys saw, that like we kind of lost a couple of games with it.
Sure.
However, like the strategy has worked to a certain extent. So like the execution from us is not fully there yet, but in general, yes, I do love playing hunters in the mid lane, and with what we're trying to do on her or any other hunters that can utilize stone cutting swords really well, or like burning objectives really well, is going to help us a lot, right? So yes, we are trying this stuff out. We still have a couple of things in store, not to say the least. We're going to see them as we're moving forward. But for now, yeah, we have tried to play a little bit more around objectives and get ahead through objectives and potentially win a game from them.
Yeah, I think we've seen like steady improvement on this strategy, because I think I even saw a couple games like 3 weeks ago. I think like you tried it out versus SSG once or twice, and those games didn't go super well. But you sort of see the start of the strat there, and right now I think when you guys played this past week, it was really improved, and you're taking games off of these other teams and things like that. Where do these sorts of strats, where do they start from? Like, is it just like a germ in one person's mind? He's like, hey, I think this could be really good, and then the whole team starts experimenting, or like, how does this come about?
I think it's more so that like Sino, it's more so Sino and Bobby are kind of like talking about what they want to do, because they're the shot callers of the team, and pretty much everybody just like follows through with like what they kind of want to do. So yeah, that's kind of it. They come up with an idea, they say their idea, they say how they want to do things, and then we just like go through with it, and that's pretty much how everything happens.
Sure. You mentioned Bobby being a shot caller. How has that been? I know this is really his first season in the SPL. Most of the other people on this team are somewhat veterans, at least. I know Ducky played in EU SPL for a long time, along with you. And, you know, Wlfy has always been sort of either on the bottom of the SPL or at the top of the SEC, it feels like, as far as hunters go. And as well as Sino, you know, being a world champion. How has it been for Bobby to, you know, be a shot caller? Do you think he's been good enough for you guys, or have there been some growing pains with a rookie in that sort of role?
I mean, obviously, for me, at the very least, this year has been very weird, just because like I'm a vocal person. I like to talk a lot. I like to take control. I like to have full control of my core, do things the way I want them to be, or I want them to do. And this year has been I've actually struggled quite a lot, because I had to like be more quiet, be more reserved, not talk so much, let Bobby and Sino talk for like the most part, play the game in a certain way that like I'm not used to play the game. And so for myself, I definitely feel like this year has been a little bit of a struggle in terms of like I don't know how much outside of the game, but definitely inside of the game. It's a lot of like adaptation that I had to go through, and I can't say that I've fully enjoyed it, you know. But
Sure.
You gotta do what you gotta do. It just is what it is.
Yeah. You say, you know, you've toned down a little bit on the vocal side, letting Inbound and Sino sort of take the reins in terms of calling. On your past teams, and I know we'll probably talk about them a little bit more later on, but on your past teams, were you one of the main sort of shot callers, or did that, like, how did that work?
So as far as Rival goes, because I've been with Rival for like probably 3 years and a half, I can't even remember off the top of my head, but in Rival we had very dedicated roles. We were kind of like, we didn't have a designated shot caller, but everybody was talking and everybody was contributing to the calls itself. As far as like team fights were going, as soon as we were getting to team fights, Vote was like the person who was like very vocal. But meanwhile, we were getting to team fights, or we were getting to that point, I had myself and Kalas were pretty much having like the game plan like set down, and in terms of like invades or buff invades or things like that, Ice was the one talking about stuff, but like the general idea was coming from myself and Kalas. So we're like the two most vocal people in the team. Defwalker was kind of trolling. Guys was obviously just Defwalker was trolling with his like fire giant calls for like 10 minutes or whatever it was. Ice was like again having like full control of like the buffs and like when we're invading buffs and how we're invading them and things like that. And Callis and I were just having the idea of like how we're doing things and when we're getting when we're going for objectives, if we're committing, if we're not, how we're playing the team fights and stuff like that. And Vote would be having full range of the target that would be focusing at that particular point in time, because we would know how much damage you would be having in hand. So for me to like not talk at all or not talk nearly as much and be like really quiet is just I don't feel like myself anymore. But hey, it is what it is.
Sure. Do you think, like, I don't want to say that this is the way your team should do things or things like that. Is there some benefit to, and I imagine it's not like you're just quiet in the comms. Everyone has to be talking to relay information and things like that. But would you say you and Kalas on those teams are focused on like macro play? More like, more than like the micro sort of like target selection that Vote and other people were more focused on?
Yeah, probably a little bit more. Yeah, that is definitely, I would say so, yeah.
Okay. So I did want to sort of get your opinion on where you feel like your team could improve the most. A lot of teams say it's all about communication because they trust people mechanically. And I'm sure that is the case for you guys. I think almost all of you guys are very good mechanical players. But I want to hear from you what you guys think is where you need to work on the most things for your squad.
Just gotta work on being in the same page, right? Because there are going to be times where like we're not going to be in the same page, or there are going to be times where like let's say one person dies, and like as soon as like one person dies, everybody else should just drop it. You're trying to be safe, you're trying to stay safe, so you can actually have a chance of like winning the game. But there are times where like one person dies, and then like another one dies, and another one, and everything crumbles.
Sure.
So when things like that happen, that's one thing that like we obviously could be improving on, and another thing that we could improve on, like it's again, as you said, that like we've been playing more around objectives, right? So because we've been playing more around objectives, we need to get to that point of actually being on objectives and playing together and getting to like that point in, like, I wouldn't say necessarily team fights, but grouping and try to take the objectives, right? Because that's going to be our strength. So if we're not going to be on the same page when we're going to be trying to do those type of things, then the whole strategy is going to crumble and we're going to be losing by default, right? So that's probably like the two things, I suppose, that we could be working on, or like we are trying to work on, not to say the least.
Sure. Last couple questions about Phase 2. I know we saw that the Sanguine's coach recently was able to join their team. And I just wanted to ask about Kassir. Are there any plans for him to join you guys for the Worlds run?
Honestly, I think with like how things stand and how travel to the US is at the moment, I don't think that's going to be possible. I think it was possible for the Sanguine lads because, again, he's not traveling from EU, which is the biggest thing.
Sure.
But him traveling from EU and him needing to get a visa and everything, I don't think is going to be possible. I might be wrong on this one. I'm not 100% sure, but I would say I'm 90% sure that he is going to be coaching from home.
Sure. Okay, so can you talk a little bit about some of the stuff Kassir brings to the table for your team? Because I think there are some other coaches that maybe have a bit higher of a profile. And so we get to hear more of their thoughts, like Biggie and Ro and Slaney. They seem to make all the appearances on the Smite desk and things like that. So can you talk a little bit about what Kassir helps you guys with and brings to your team?
So Kassir is going to be helping us with, like, for example, before SPL days, he is going to be helping us on picks and bans. He's going to be analyzing other teams. He's going to be giving us the information of like what other teams do, where they play, how they play, and things like that. In drafting, or not in drafting, in scrims, for example, he's going to be watching the games. He's going to be analyzing the games, give us feedback on like the things that we've did right and the things that we've done wrong, and what we should be looking to improve going forward. And it's also like outside of the game. He's been helping pretty much everybody outside of the game, like talking to everyone, getting to know us better, getting to like try to make everybody work together and stuff like that. Because in every single team there are going to be arguments or disagreements, I should say,
sure.
right? Like where people are going to be clashing. So he's been taking care of that as well. So yeah, he's been an all around great coach.
Great. That's great to hear. Last thing about phase 2 is, we're sort of coming to the end. How are you guys trying to stay focused on Worlds? I know you guys are going to have to go through the qualifiers probably and things like that. What are some things you guys as a team are doing to just stay focused on that end goal?
Well, you just gotta and the main thing is like for every single team or every single professional players that plays the game is like to not get discouraged, because either being at the top or at the bottom, you just gotta not get discouraged by your strategy, because like as soon as you lose faith in your strategy, then like again, it's not going to work. It's just how it's going to be, because if you don't believe in it, that's just what it is. It's not going to work. So obviously believing in the strategy, trying to like polish it as much as we can, and we have about 2 months, or roughly about 2 months till the qualifiers are going to be coming into play. So in these 2 months that we have at our disposal, we might as well just try to improve on everything that we can and polish the strategy and the strategies that we also have in the in testing, I guess, right? So we can have multiple strategy that we're going into Worlds, and we know what we need to do once it comes to playing against whoever we are going to have to play against.
Sure. Just a quick follow-up here about phase 2 is we've talked, and I've talked to some of our analysts about some teams saving picks for these tournaments, some teams sort of like showing everything that they have. Do you think, because the phase is going to end, I think, in like 3 weeks from now?
It's something like that.
2 or 3 weeks. So like you said, there's like going to be a large portion of time, even after playoffs, where there's not going to be any Smite action taking place. Do you feel safe maybe revealing some strats now, knowing that you'll have time to think of new ones before Worlds?
Well, it's a little bit tricky. There are teams that, for example, they are very meta type, like they are meta focused, where regardless of the situation, they are just going to be playing the meta characters no matter what. So those teams that like for example, they are playing meta now, they are just going to be trying to like polish their own play, most likely. That's what I'm going to predict. That cannot be 100% true, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to be polishing their own plays or their own picks, and they are going to be trying to get the most out of those picks. Some people might be trying more characters, depending on what they want to do, of course. But it's also like the biggest thing is like, most likely if you're a really hot team right now, there is a chance on like 2 months of like sitting I don't want to say sitting on the bench, but like sitting aside and just like scrimming, you could be losing your momentum. So if there can be like a downside of like, if you're getting hot too quickly, you might be losing your momentum going into Worlds, because you have literally 2 months of like doing absolutely nothing, apart from scrimming. So the competition is not going to be the same. The scrims are not going to be the same as playing a real tournament as well, especially with Worlds. And everybody at Worlds tends to be really, really hot, right? So and the meta also changes going into Worlds. Most of the time, there are going to be maybe not major meta shifts, but there are going to be some meta shifts where some characters might become better, some characters might become worse, some characters might stay the same. So it's really important to like peak at the right time as well as the team.
All right, let's move on maybe to talking about phase 1, talking about you sort of coming back into the league after that year-long break. Let me just ask, what did you do during that year off? I know you were streaming quite a bit, and then how was it sort of integrating back into the SPL? Had it changed in that year that you had taken off, and what was sort of some things that surprised you coming back into the SPL?
So the one thing, because when I played in season 5, I played in EU, and there was a new league. unfortunately, when I came back, everybody got merged together. So the
Sure.
one thing that I've noticed was the fact that like the meta has changed to the fact that everybody was playing overly aggressive. There wasn't like this passive play where every European was playing like that, where like it was kind of passive. Everybody was like playing a little bit more strategic and stuff like that. People are still playing strategic. It's just the fact that like scrims become this fight show where like everybody just fights and fights and fights, and you're like, well, this is no good because you're not really learning anything from this, but everybody's just fighting 24/7.
Sure.
So that threw me off really badly. Everybody playing aggressive, everybody keep going on fighting, and like it throws me off at times because there are some particular plays that like they happen in scrims that like they would never happen in the SPL. So I'm like, what is even going on? So that's where people like just test limits and they just go out of their way to play really, really aggressive, right?
Sure.
But in terms of like my year off from the SPL is probably like the best thing that has happened to me, to be completely honest, because it's just having like 1 year off and just sitting on the side watching other people play, and it just gave me the possibility to kind of like reset my mentality and just look at the game differently and mature a lot more than I probably would have by playing the game. So yeah, I don't regret it by no means. I think what like that season 6 year was probably like the best thing to happen to me in terms of like my career. Obviously, it sucks to like come back and be last place, where I feel like I'm better than last place, but that's just how it's going to be. You know, it just gotta suck it up and move forward, and that's about it.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were rusty coming back in after, not being in the scrims? I don't know if you were playing. Were you playing in the EU SEC in season 6?
No, I did not play any competitive.
Yeah, so that must have been, it must have been a bit of a sort of shock to go from like no competitive at all to like back into all the scrims all the time and things like that. How was that? Were your skills still sharp after that year off? I mean, I know you were streaming and things like that, but it's all the other players tell me there's like, high levels ranked is one level, competitive is another level, and then like SPL scrims are another level, and then like actual SPL is another level, and then even like LAN is another level above that.
Yeah.
So fluctuating between those levels has got to be kind of difficult. How was, transitioning back into the SPL?
Transitioning back into the SPL wasn't difficult. I think what was difficult was the fact learning to play with different people, playing with the same people for like 3 years and a half or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then like going to a completely different style of play, different ways of seeing the game, different picks, different strategies, different, like everything was just different. So in terms of like the mechanical skill, I don't think the mechanical skill was an issue. The adaptation was the hardest part, and I still struggle with the adaptation to this day. So again, it's a matter of like, if you, I think in general, if you take a year off, or like even if you take a split off or things like that, is not a big deal, as long as like when you come back, you're going to be on the same page with everybody from your team. If you're on the same page with everybody from your team, and everything is like smooth sailing, because everything just falls into place and everything feels good.
Right.
But when you're not on the same play, I mean the same on the same I don't know. I'm forgetting my word right now. Yeah, there you go, page. On the same page with your team, it's just everything crumbles and falls apart, and that's where like you feel like you could do more, but then you overwork yourself, because like you're gonna is like hitting your head against the wall. It's like regardless of whatever you're going to be doing, you can focus as much as you want, or you can be as careless as you want. If you're not going to be on the same page with your teammates, then it's going to be a little bit pointless. And that's kind of like the sad truth, that like that's just what it is. That's why you see teams doing like incredibly well, that they're going to be at the top because they're going to be on the same page, and teams that they are struggling to do that, they are going to be more towards the bottom, right?
Yeah. Well, and also you guys had some roster changes early on in phase 1 with Weekend. I don't think he was there for more than 4 or 5 weeks, if I recall correctly.
I don't remember for how long we played with Weekend, actually.
Yeah.
I really don't remember.
Yeah, because it seems like so long ago,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
didn't play
Must
that
have been
much.
like must have been like 1 or 2 months, something around those lines.
Sure, yeah. What was that transition like? From Weekend being on the team to not being on the team but having to play with him, right? I think there was one week where you guys had to still play with Weekend even though he was sort of like kicked from the team.
I mean, he was never kicked. He
Or
left
he left
himself.
before he left. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, when we played in the last week, we literally just were like, okay, we're just going to be sticking to the strat, and if it's going to work, it's going to work. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's no big deal, and there were no hard feelings between the players, including myself or Weekend. I mean, I think he is an incredible human being. It's just the
Sure.
fact that we weren't on the same page, and he knew that we were on the same page. And at the same time, if you keep on losing and losing and losing, you just get discouraged to the point where you're like, it just takes too much time from my day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're just again just bashing your head against the wall. So he chose to back out, and which is completely understandable.
Yeah, yeah. How
I
was the
completely respect his
transition?
decision.
How was the
Uh,
transition to Sino? Like, was there an immediate difference with Sino on the team, or are you, I think a lot of becoming successful in the SPL is growing with your team, and so sometimes it just takes time and experience, right?
right, and when we got Sino, we had like the honeymoon, which we did well in that in that honeymoon where it was like for a week or like 2 weeks,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
everybody like nobody was um, clashing or anything like that. But obviously, the more you know someone and the more you play with someone, the more likely it is that you're going to be clashing with
of
that
course,
person.
yeah,
So yeah, at the beginning everything was fine. It's still like I had my clash with Sino, for example. I'm pretty sure other players had their clash with Sino or other players together, for example. But in general, everything is kind of just we're just listening to each other and we're trying to like make it work. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it works, it works, and that's pretty much what it is.
yeah, yeah. I feel that. Last thing I want to ask about Phase One is, we talked about how Bobby is a rookie this year in the SPL. Can you maybe talk about his improvement from Phase One all the way to now in Phase Two? Because a lot of people have been making the case that he might be the most improved player in the league. Can you give us sort of an inside look into that?
So at the beginning when Bobby came into the split, obviously he used to play a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more reckless, if I may say, where he wanted to like run it down a little bit more, right? And that doesn't really work against experienced players that they will know what you're going to be doing, and
Sure.
that they are going to be abusing absolutely every single thing from like laning phase. They are going to be abusing you in the laning phase to abusing you into like when they are going to be rotating over to when you're going to be fighting in the core and things like that. So like when, of course, like at the beginning when he didn't have, if he didn't have a lead or something like that, he would end up like being in positions where he might not needed to be.
Mm.
As far as his improvement's been quite incredible. I mean, him and while we've been talking to each other, they've been they've been improving in the laning phase. We have been improving like the way he positions, how he takes plays, how he's zoning, how he's doing his calls as well. So in terms of like playing in the core as well in team fights, obviously there is like a slip here and there where like he is going out. I mean, like he is and he ends up on like the other side of the team fight, I should say.
Sure.
But in general, he has improved like a really good amount.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're gonna move on to maybe talking about some of your past seasons here. Um, must be very difficult to be sort of back to back second place finishing. Can you talk to me about that rival run and why you guys decided to split up after that season? I think that
So
season five, right, was the second.
season 5 was
Yeah,
the second run, and after that season, we knew everything is going to be falling apart. The reason everything was falling apart is because it was the main thing was that Deflocker wanted to like try a new environment. He wanted to try a new team, and with that, Vote was kind of in the same boat. He was like, "Well, if Deflocker is leaving, I kind of want to try something new as well." So it's like you know, like if one person does that, it might as well someone else try that as well. And then I was kind of like in between, where like I want to play and I didn't want to play. I want to take a year off just because I didn't want to move to NA, and I also want to like focus on myself a little bit more and reflect upon myself.
Sure.
So at that point in time, there was only Callus and Ice left, right? Like there was like the new PK team, which was Emilzy, Adapting, Zyrus, Defalker, and Vote alongside Ro. And on the other hand, Callus and Ice were trying to like find a team, which they found a team in United with Big Man Things, Benji, and Vitium or Vitium, whatever his name was, and then they changed it with Emilito, right? So at that point, it really sucked, because like Callus was trying his absolute best to like keep the team together, and again, because Defalker and Vote went different ways, and I went a different way. Everything again, it just fell apart.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of how it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit, because you stayed with that team, like you said earlier on, for like 3.5 years. Is there some benefit for teams sticking together through multiple years? Like, I think even the SK squad, we would say, was sort of like at least like a 2-year journey for them, because it was basically the same trifecta team from the Worlds previous. Do you think there's some benefit to teams sticking together for maybe 1 or 2 years to be able to compete at the highest level?
Yeah, I think 100%, but it's a matter of like not only sticking the teams that they stick together, they also need to be good friends, because if you're sticking together just for the sake of sticking together, because you're like, well, we believe and we're gonna improve and whatever, but like if the friendship is not there, if you're not spending time together, if you don't care for each other, if you have things like that, you're going to improve. You're not going to improve at a fast rate, and that's how it is, right? But the special, what was special about Rival is the fact that, and I'll probably never forget that team, is the fact that like we're friends. We're breaking boundaries, I could say, right? Like we're probably talking about things, and like we're saying things to each other that nobody would even like comprehend to begin with. But at the end of the day, we had arguments. If you're jumping into our Discord and you are hearing an argument between like all of us and like just having like a little bit of a breakdown, you could literally think that like the team would fall apart right there. But like after literally probably 10 minutes, everybody was making up with each other and everything was completely fine.
Yeah.
And in general, I do think that like this type of arguments, they need to happen. You need to have arguments, but you also need to have the capability of solving these issues and understanding each other. Because if you're not having arguments, and if you're not having the possibility to solve those arguments and understand each other, then you're not going to be able to see each other's point of view, and you again is going to be helping you towards improving.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think friendship plays a big part of it. Skill and friendship play a major thing, but also understanding of each other. You need to understand each other and realize that it's more to it, right? Because if you're going to lose a game in the SPL or a set in the SPL, and then you're going to be trying to like break each other's heads, then quite frankly, you're not going to keep that team for like longer than a split or a year.
Yeah. So speaking as someone who's had quite a lot of experience in Worlds tournaments, what are some lessons that you've taken from those Worlds runs and those teams that you can bring to Obey now? Or maybe even not just bring to Obey now, but what are some things that you've learned from, those Worlds runs? Because I feel like when a team makes it to Worlds, it changes their perspective on their professional gaming.
I don't know how much it changed my perspective on gaming as a whole. It was just it was a matter of like having fun with my friends and just having the possibility to win a lot of money, right? And getting a world championship. But in terms of like what Worlds, every every individual proceeds differently, and they have a different point of view when they come when they play into like this type of tournaments, right? When you play in front of a crowd, when there is a lot of money on the line, when you want to win a tournament that like you've been working so hard throughout the entire year, there is going to be anxiety, there is going to be fear of losing, there is going to be excitement, there is going to be a lot of emotions, then a lot of things that run through your head that like you need to be able to control. And if you're not going to control that, you're going to be, when you're going to be coming to play the game, and when it's going to be game time, you're probably going to be making many misplays where you're going to look back at them and you're going to regret them.
Sure.
So the biggest thing and the biggest advice for most players that they've never played on a LAN or things like that is a matter of the fact that, are you just going to be scared of losing and go for a play that you think you're going to throw and then never go? I mean, like, okay, point in case is like, if you're not going to be going for a play just because you're scared of losing, but then you end up losing anyways, you're literally always going to be thinking back of that tournament, and you're going to be like, man, if I did this, man, if I did that, I could have done more, I could have done less, or whatever. And if you're going to lose, and if your team threw the game, whatever. Who the fuck cares?
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody from the team is going to be able to understand each other. Because if you're not going to be able to understand each other, then you're not meant to. I mean, like, you're not meant to stay with that team to begin with.
Sure.
And that's just what it is. And I'm not going to beat it around the bush, right? Like, it's a matter of, like, again, people need to be understanding. I mean, they need to understand each other, and they need to be on the same page, and to be able to pick each other up. And if they're not going to do that, then they are simply not meant for each other.
Sure. Do you feel like a lot of times at these big LAN events, it comes down to, being calm and having a strong mental more than maybe either skill or strats? Because I feel like a lot of times, I don't know, I talk about how there's a lot of parity in the league, where I think almost any team on any given day could probably beat another team. But, and that's why I feel like maybe mentality plays a bit more of a role. How do you feel about that?
I think like the mentality so much. Yes, mentality a little bit. I would say like being calm and stuff like that is not so much. I do think like being calm plays a major factor, but it's just that like you need to like many people tend to like go from like being calm to being scared. So like that's the two things that like you should never like go from like being too calm and trying to play too perfectly to being to the point of being too reserved to like do certain things that like you should probably do because they could potentially give you a disadvantage. I mean, an advantage or a disadvantage.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, at the moment as things stand right now, you would say yes, at any given day or at any given time, there would be a possibility from any team to beat any other team. But yeah, it I would say at this point, it's a matter of like, I'm going to say about 60% draft, 40% plays.
Sure. All right, we're coming up sort of to the end of my interview here, and usually I like to ask about people who you might consider mentors on your SPL journey, and then if you don't have any mentors, or even if you do, are there players who you would consider maybe your rival, someone that you were always fighting against throughout your career?
So one person that I was an incredible friend with and that I've been talking throughout my entire journey to the Pro League, and meanwhile we're there together, was Yamin. And Yamin would be probably the only person that I would, obviously there was Prime, there was Zyrus as well that I would tend to like face a lot.
Sure.
But there was Big Man at the beginning of Big Man's career, right? There were many other mid laners that I tend to like, I got to the point of like actually meeting and playing against. But the only person that I looked up to and that I always like genuinely respected, regardless of the situation, was Yamin. Because I was talking to Yamin the most. I was doing like our gods were quite similar, or I mean god pools were quite similar as well. We're doing a lot of things, and it was also the fact that we're scrim partners, right?
Sure.
So because we're scrim partners, we're doing a lot of things together, and we're teammates before. Because before he was playing in a team with me, I was the mid laner, he was the AD carry. So Yeah, I do have a good amount of history with Yamin, like inside of a team and outside of the team, and as being rivals and as being friends. Which
Sure, sure.
It's always going to be one of those things that like I'm probably always gonna remember them. I mean, remember him as being one of the, or if the best mid laner out there.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I'm basically all out of questions here, Wlfy. So now we're talking about who you have beef with. Who's
Who I have beef with.
Yeah, who do you have beef with? Who you gonna call out in the league? All right, talk some trash here.
I don't have beef with anybody. I had like I had a little bit of a go with oh my god, what was it? I think it was a little, I don't know, was it like 2 years ago or 3 years ago? Well, I had a little bit of a go with like Emilito.
Sure, sure.
But I don't even think that Emilito gives a shit, and honestly, I don't either. So I don't even think that even matters.
What about are there any teams that are making your scrim sessions a little more making them bad, or anybody you want to call out? Maybe not beef.
No. I mean, like in terms of like how fast people show up for scrims, it'd be like Sanguine. Sanguine is like probably an hour late, but or no, it's not an hour, but it's about like 10-20 minutes, right?
Sure.
But no, I mean everything is like smooth sailing. I don't really have beef with anybody. Again, it's probably only against like I had to go with Emilito a couple of years ago. But again, we ended up like blocking each other, or he blocked me or something like that, and I never cared for him. He never cared for me, and we moved on with our lives. So it's not.
Man, you guys are too nice. I ask every pro who are they beefing with, and no one has beef. So you guys need to.
Everybody's too nice, man.
Too nice.
But as soon as they get into like their team environment and they get into an SPL game, they are literally just running their fucking mouth all the fucking time. That is literally incredible. It's like, kill this fucking idiot. Oh, he's so garbage. He's so shit. And it's like, okay, dude. But yet, like when you do interviews, nobody says anything. It's like fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well then, no one to call out, no beef. At least I'll give you some time to shout some people out. The floor is yours. And also, if you have any thoughts on the game, if there's anything in the community that angers you, I like to give the players an opportunity to maybe have a soapbox and speak their mind a little bit. So, the floor is yours, Wlfy.
I mean, I don't know, man. I genuinely think the Smite community is probably like the most tight community I've ever been a part of, because like they genuinely. So I'm quite fortunate to have like a really, really genuine community. For example, in my stream, but like in general, if you watch any other Smite streamer, Smite community is so like I don't want to say diverse, because they are not diverse, but they are so together and supportive of like anybody, right?
Sure.
Unless you're a dickhead, but like that's just what it is, right? It blows me away how incredible this community actually is, right? So yeah, shout outs to the Smite community. The haters can fuck off, but yeah, it's just an incredible community.
Sure. Any other shout outs you want to give?
I don't really have anything, honestly. I think that would be kind of it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. I really appreciate it, and I want to wish you and your team the best of luck going forward in the rest of the phase and qualifiers and worlds, and looking forward to next year as well.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.